Territorialization simply means how well defined the identity of an assemblage is. When an assemblage, let's go back to an assemblage that's easy to think of, an assemblage like a small town or an ethnic neighborhood, a community inhabiting that small town or ethnic neighborhood. That small town will have, of course, its borders, its territory. It occupies a particular territory, and the ethnic neighborhood also occupies a particular territory. Now think, for instance, of something like Lebanon before the Civil War, which is not that long ago, 30 years or so ago. There were many communities of different ethnic backgrounds, of different religious backgrounds. Some were Christians, some were Muslims, some were Jewish, living within their own territories, but side by side. And before the Civil War, there was plenty of intermarriage between ethnicities and even between religions. And they were the friendship networks crossed the limits of the neighborhoods. So you had friends of different ethnicities and different religions in other neighborhoods, and they were good friends of yours. So people crossed freely from one neighborhood to another, and even intermarried, which is even a more permanent form of crossing those limits. We could say that before the Civil War, the different communities inhabiting the neighborhoods in Lebanon were deterritorialized. In other words, their borders were fuzzy. They blended into one another. They overlapped with one another. And they had intercalary elements, those people who intermarried, which were joining them into are supposed to keep them separated. But the moment the Civil War started, not only gangs of youths began to police the actual borders of the neighborhood and began to beat up people that belonged to other religions if they dared to cross the borders of the neighborhood. In other words, they sharpened the physical borders of the neighborhood by policing them. But not only that, but the people within the neighborhoods began to police each other to see, are you a true Muslim? Are you a true Jew? Are you a true Christian? Whereas before the Civil War, they would allow you to lapse a little bit in your Christian beliefs. Maybe you didn't go to church every Sunday, or maybe you didn't pray if you were a Muslim exactly at the same hour of the day that everybody else is praying. Or maybe if you were a Jew, you opened your business on Saturday when it was not supposed to be. And they allowed you to do that, precisely because they were deterritorialized, the borders were fuzzy. Once the conflict began, everybody began, the distinction between us and them became sharp. Are you a Christian? Well, if you're a Christian, then you are not a Jew, and you're not a Muslim. You're not supposed to be marrying Jews and Muslims. You're not supposed to be having friends in the Jewish and Muslim communities. And they began to police one another to see, also, you do not attend Mass every Sunday, so perhaps you are not a very good Christian, so perhaps we could not trust you. Conflict territorializes communities. Conflict sharpens the boundaries between communities. Conflict sharpens the distinction between us versus them. And so territorialization and deterritorialization in the first place refer precisely to how sharply delimited or how fuzzy form are the limits of a territory. But of course, we can extend that to a whole variety of spatial borders. They don't necessarily have to be territories in the proper sense of the word. Territories do apply to cities, they do apply to towns, they do apply to neighborhoods, but they can also apply to a variety of, in a more general sense, territorialization defines how sharply defined is the identity of an assemblage, how unchanging is the identity of the assemblage, how homogeneous is the identity of the assemblage, and deterritorialization is the opposite. How many heterogeneous elements can an assemblage accommodate? How fuzzy are the boundaries so that the assemblage basically blends with other assemblages, and there are areas of indetermination where like you don't know if this is one assemblage or another because that's the overlapping area. That's an assemblage that's deterritorialized, it's more open to change. And that is basically the end of the matter. Now,